So looking at personal pronouns in the dative case. By definition, a pronoun replaces or modifies a noun. So many of the ones that you've looked at before in English would be like he, she, it, they, them, we, us, etc. We're going to look at the ones that now happen in the dative case. So because we're utilizing the dative case, let's go ahead and review the dative case in reference to our nominative and accusative cases. So, utilizing the ein chart, the endings would be blank, e, blank, e. Now remembering you can't have a of many, so that would be like keine or meine, n, e, blank, e. Remembering these just mean no ending. And now we're on the dative, so the memory trick is Mr. Minnesota, M-R-M-N. So M-R-M-N. Emeryman. Emeryman. Sort of as a check. And for the or the der chart, der, die, das, die, den, die, das, die, dem, der, dem, den. Once again, kind of looking at the memory trick of Mr. MR Minnesota, MN as a help. So let's go ahead and dive into personal pronouns. So we've looked at personal pronouns already in the nominative case, and we've seen them in the accusative, and now we're going to look at them in the dative. So things you need to note. By definition, a pronoun is replacing a noun. And so in English, if we have the sentence, I buy my mom a book, we can replace any noun with a pronoun. Now, if you look at this sentence, we already have a pronoun. Go ahead and write this down and circle the word that is already a pronoun. If you circled I, you would be correct. So I is already a pronoun. If we look at I buy my mom a book, we could say I buy my mom it. It would replace a book. But what we're going to look at for today is what is it here when we're looking at the dative case. Because when we're looking at the dative case, we have this accusative, direct object, right? So I buy who or what. I buy a book. To whom or for whom? My mom. So that now in English is the indirect object. And for us in German, we're looking at that as the dative case. So how do we replace that? In English, we just say, I buy her a book. We're going to learn what is this her in German today. So, in German, looking at the dative case, we have I buy, ich kaufe. If we're looking at that as I buy, we already had I as our pronoun. So we've learned the nominative case or the subject. Ich kaufe. I buy who or what? I buy a book. So this is our accusative case, direct object. I buy a book to whom or for whom. That is our dative case, right? Because that's our indirect object. So the difference between the accusative and the dative in English is the accusative is the direct object, dative is the indirect object. So as we've seen the indirect object already in the dative case, how do we go from I buy my mom a book to I buy her a book? And that's what we're learning. Just to kind of let you know, it's going to be ich kaufe ihr ein Buch. So let's go ahead and dive into those personal pronouns, shall we? You're going to want to write this chart down. So first and foremost, we have learned the personal pronouns already in the nominative case. This is something you typically do in German fairly close to day one. We utilize this when we conjugate verbs. So, ich, du, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie. We divide this up into singular, and we divide this up into plural. Ich, du, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie. So we know these. Kind of a quick little trick is if you think about the der chart, right? Der, die, das, die. If you think about der, die, das, die, we probably notice some similarities, right? Like der is er, masculine. Die is like the Z, as the das. Z is like the D. So this is going to kind of help give you a little trick. So this is if it's the subject. I, you, he, she, it. We, you, they. What happens in the accusative case? So we already looked at this. It becomes ich becomes mich, du, dich, ihn, sie, es, wir, uns. So we becomes us, ihr, euch, sie, sie. And you can kind of remember this if you think about the der chart. Der, die, das, die, den, die, das, die. Let me go ahead and write that. Den, die, das, die. Because you are going ahead and now replacing what would have been like the man, the lady, the child, the books with a personal pronoun. So den, ihn, die, sie, das, es, die, sie. So one more time. Ich, mich, du, dich, ihn, sie, es. Plural. Wir, uns, ihr, euch, sie, sie. Now the dative case is new. Remembering that the dative case is our indirect object. So if you think back to the der chart, der, die, das, die, den, die, das, die, dem, der, dem, den, that's going to help us as we reveal what those are. So let me go ahead and get this chart ready to go. So you'll notice some pretty big changes here, right? Mich is different than ich, du, dich. And so now we see words like mir and dir. So follow with me and fill this in. Ich, mich, mir, du, dich, dir. Ihn, ihm, sie, ihr, es, ihm, wir, uns, ihr, euch, sie, ihnen, sie, ihnen. And you might recall this from like asking me as a teacher, wie geht es ihnen? So there's a formal case. So if you think about our der chart again, der, die, das, die, den, die, das, die, dem, der, dem, den, this is going to help you because dem, the M ending is ihm, der, R, M, und so weiter. So once again, the chart you need to know backwards and forwards. Ich, mich, mir, du, dich, dir, ihn, ihm, sie, ihr, es, ihm. Plurals. Wir, uns, ihr, euch, sie, ihnen, sie, ihnen. So if you think back to that first sentence where I was talking about the mother, right? We had mother, so feminine. That would be feminine for she. And we had to make sure that it was dative case. So how do we replace mother with the feminine? And if you recall, I went ahead and said, ich kaufe ihr ein Buch. Feminine dative. Feminine dative for ear. So personal pronouns, knowing this chart's not too bad. It's remembering that there's 3 ways something can be dative. Something can be dative because it's an indirect object. Something can be dative because we're utilizing a dative verb. Something can be dative because we have a dative preposition. And that's what makes this a little more challenging. So let's go ahead and rewrite these sentence says, rewrite the nouns that are in red with a personal pronoun. In your notes, you need to write everything that you see here and everything that we're about to write in order to get credit. So, the policeman gives the driver a ticket. So let's go ahead and dissect this a bit first. So, the verb. What's the verb in the sentence? And do exactly what I do, underline. Verb. Who or what gives? The police officer. So now we have a subject and a verb. The police officer gives who or what? Well, the police officer doesn't give the driver. You can't give a driver. The police officer gives a ticket. So this is the direct object accusative. You should have every single marking just like I have it. The police officer gives a ticket to whom or for whom? The driver gives the ticket to the driver. So this is the dative case. Sorry, your writing's going to be much better than mine. So how do we rewrite this sentence? If you rewrote the sentence with ear, you would be correct. I help the man. Well, we ask ourselves, who or what is the verb? Helfen. Oh, sorry, what's the verb? Sorry, helfen, to help. Who or what helps? I help. Anything special about this verb? Is it a linking verb? It's a dative verb, which means this automatically becomes dative. So how do we say, I help him? If you look back to the chart, you should see masculine, dative, ihm. So, ich helfe ihm. The last one, we do that with a computer. So this one we can go ahead and dissect, but what you should notice right away is that this is a dative preposition. Also bei mit nach Zeit von zu. So that automatically makes the object of the preposition, so this is the object of the preposition, automatically makes that dative. So, something to note.